When we started the day, though, we made a point to share that the original symposium was about American cuisine. And I think we can all agree that it's imperative that we discuss hospitality as a critical part of today's dining and restaurant experience. I feel so strongly about this that I'm going to moderate the next panel with some of my favorite people in the business, those that have pioneered their own style of hospitality and certainly have strong opinions on the topic. Ashley Christensen, Danny Meyer, Drew Niperon, and Will Gadara. Let me tell you a little bit about them as if you don't already know. It takes more than being a great chef to make a great restaurant, and no one is more on that pulse than Ashley Christensen. Ashley is James Beard Award-winning chef who came from Raleigh, North Carolina right now, you all, to be here with us, where she has built more than a few outstanding restaurants: Pool's Diner, Death and Taxes, Beasley's Chicken and Honey, Fox's Liquor Bar, and the upcoming Poolside Pie. I want to hear more about that one. She perhaps more importantly also built a community via her restaurants based on her Remember Kindness philosophy. In a recent interview with Eater, Ashley said when she thinks about what makes a restaurant an Ashley Christensen restaurant, her answer is the people, her staff, her guests, and how her restaurants can play a role in the community. As I'm sure most of you know, Danny Meyer is the founder and CEO of the Union Square Hospitality Group. He opened his first restaurant in 1985, Union Square Cafe. 30-something years later, USHG is comprised of some of New York's most beloved and acclaimed restaurants, including Gramercy Tavern, The Modern, Milano, and Shake Shack, which went public in 2015. Danny is also a renowned author whose book, Setting the Table, discusses business and life principles that translate to a wide range of industries and has become required reading in areas such as innovative leadership and corporate responsibility, all of which I think we can agree are fundamentals of hospitality. Drew Niperon, well, for all of them, yes, and Ashley. Drew Niperon is the founder of Myriad Restaurant Group, which operates the acclaimed restaurants Tribeca Grill, I love that one, Nobu, New York City, Nobu 57, Nobu London, Batard, Porsche Grill at City Field, and Crush and Wine Spirits, and more. Over the last 30 years, Myriad has opened and operated over 40 restaurants around the world. About Drew, Myriad partner Marty Shapiro was recently quoted in a Grove Street article as saying, "Taking care of people separates him. Others feel that way, but it's in his soul." Will Gadara is the co-owner of Make It, I don't want to step on his applause. These are like my heroes here, my heroes. Will Gadara is the co-owner of Make It Nice, a hospitality group that currently includes 11 Madison Park, Nomad, and the Nomad Bar in New York City and Los Angeles, and soon to open in Las Vegas. And Made Nice, a fast casual concept in New York City that I love. Will embodies hospitality through and through, having worked for Danny at Union Square Hospitality Group for 6 years before buying 11 Madison Park with his partner, Chef Daniel Hum. He's also co-founder of the Welcome Conference, an annual hospitality-driven event that brings together the best minds from the world of hospitality. I love that conference. So I'm going to quickly tell you, it's amazing, true, but let me talk just a little bit about hospitality today. And I first want to start with a question. What is the state of hospitality in America today? What do y'all think? It's good? It's awful. I think it's awful. I think it's a dying art form. I do. But who cares? I mean, nobody seems to be working on it like as much as we like, but I care just as a human being, and I think you all too. Louis Chevalier de Jaucourt describes hospitality in the Encyclopedia as the virtue of a great soul that cares for the whole universe through the ties of humanity. I love that one. I think the diminished hospitality is part of the overall hardening of our society, and I object. Restaurants are one of the last civilized things left, but I think we could lead the way back. But maybe everyone in business should care, as we are now in a service economy, no longer a manufacturing economy, and competing in a service business is fundamentally different from competing in a manufacturing economy. In that world, business strategy drives culture. In a core service business, culture drives strategy. A service company's values are the core of its culture. Don't believe me, I read that in an old Cornell textbook where I was reading quotes by Danny Meyer and Drew Niperon. Ashley and Will, you're too young to be in that old book, okay? So the state of hospitality is awful, but we're in a service economy where culture drives strategy, so why bother with culture? Too touchy-feely, too hard to measure? You can't exactly go to your board and say, hey, culture's up 20%. But developing a hospitality culture is the single most effective method for transferring the values of an organization to your coworkers and guests. The culture will literally do the work for you. Now that's cost effective. My definition of hospitality: everything that any person, business, or organization does to affect how our guests, clients, customers, or users feel. Everything. We are all in the hospitality business. The businesses that figure this out sooner succeed faster, yet most of the world acts like this is a foreign concept a mysterious, novel idea. So I've thought a lot about why hospitality is so bad, especially when we all love being on the receiving end of genuine hospitality. And there are lots of reasons, but on some level, I think a lot of people feel it's demeaning to serve. Nobody wants to have their fingers snapped at them. But at Commander's Palace, we flip that thinking and we have a saying. It's called, it's an honor to serve. Tonight I serve you, tomorrow you serve me. It is honorable and joyous work for us to endeavor for you to float into our restaurant in a hospitality bubble that we try not to pop, striving for an absence of negatives through a fanatical commitment to the consistent execution of the fundamentals. We try to pamper you. I do like to say that fast. We say we're in the business of creating dining memories. I once heard the Claridge's GM say if our guests wrote their autobiography, we would have a small part in it, become a part of the story of people's lives. I love that. I think I heard that. I know I heard that at the Welcome Conference. How many technically great meals have we all had that don't feel very hospitable? It takes warmth and finesse and care and a sincere desire to please. And there's no place for cockiness or ambivalence. Great service is menu knowledge, warmth, and professional grace. Remember that one, Danny? Stole that from you a long, long time ago. Been using that one for years. But you also said, Danny, that no waiter or maitre d' has yet to become a household name like Wolfgang or Emerald. Well, 35 years ago when we had this symposium, we didn't know who the chefs were either. 35 years ago when this symposium happened, Ruth and Larry Forgione and Paul Prudhomme and my mom and my family and Jonathan Waxman and Jeremiah Tower didn't know they were throwing down a gauntlet and pushing to redefine the industry and start what I call the modern American food movement. They didn't know they were pioneers that would change the way America eats. There was literally a food revolution bubbling up and they were stirring the pot. James Beard and Julia Child were talking about fresh ingredients. There were murmurs, but the fresh regional farm-to-table ethos had not yet even begun. But people left that symposium and went back across the country and spread that new thinking. So, isn't it time for the hospitality revolution? There are murmurs. There are people and organizations that stick their head up above the crowd. Walt Disney, who preached warm greetings and never let you see any back of the house or character out of costume, he wanted to keep you in a certain state of mind. And Will Guidara, pushing hospitality so far, he created a conference called the Welcome Conference to scream it from the rooftops, and you should go to the Welcome Conference. And Danny Meyer, who lives it and has been saying it all for so long, he must be wondering when everyone's going to catch on. And Ashley, who only lets her team use the word guest, never customer, and she has a special word for that, she'll tell you. And Drew is the walking, talking epitome of hospitality in everything he does, including his philanthropy. But these beacons are too few. I'll quickly tell you a personal story with a point. The first painting I ever bought was a very modern Louis Armstrong. I couldn't afford it at the time, but it really spoke to me. Now, there's something going on in New Orleans right now that all you New Orleanians know about. But the Times-Picayune NOLA.com has started something called 300 for 300. They're choosing the 300 most important people in the 300-year history of New Orleans. So the first two people they picked, Louis Armstrong and Ella Brennan. So wasn't that something? My mom adored Louis Armstrong. She always said that when she died, she was going to a place called the Saloon in the Sky where Louis Armstrong was there and Ella Fitzgerald and everyone you love and nobody you don't and no hangovers, okay? So that's where she is and that's how I think of her. So this is a big, big deal to her. She gets chosen with Louis Armstrong. And I'm gonna get just the tiniest bit personal here and share that I was howling at the moon a bit a couple of weeks ago after Mom died and I saw this painting in my house and several things hit me that were wildly comforting. They are together now, I thought. Mom and Louis Armstrong are at the Saloon in the Sky. And they had so much in common. They were both ambassadors, with Louis out to the world with music, and Mom to the country and the industry with food and hospitality. Ambassadors from New Orleans. But what were Louis Armstrong and Ella Brennan really trying to tell the world? They were about joy and bringing people together. Also about pushing themselves and you to be the very best there is at what you do. Push, push, push. But don't be so strict or take yourself so seriously that you forget to allow for joy. Kick up your heels, dance, break bread together. They were not ignoring problems. They were both agitating to move things forward. They weren't perfect. They could have done more. I think they'd tell you that. But oh my, They both lived and breathed hospitality. At Commander's Palace, we call it fanatical hospitality. How do we make people feel that wonderful feeling you feel when we in this industry do what we do very well, that occasion when it all clicks? You all know what I'm talking about. You all are out there doing it every shift. The food is soulful and exciting. The warmth of the service team envelops you. Your chair is pulled. The team gives you the right of way and a gracious gesture as you walk through the room. The reservation is an actual human being, Jimmy Boudreau and Marie Devereaux, who makes you feel like the king of the palace and that your request is the most important thing that happened to us all day. The bartender who figured out who I was when I tried to slip into 11 Madison Park, Lawrence, I think his name was, Will. His extra effort to engage with me. My brother calls all this restaurant magic. These stories of how we all affect people's lives never end, and we never tire of hearing, and they're our fuel. You all have these stories, and the joy you feel when you participate in them is extraordinary. What if we all shared the ways we create our hospitality cultures? People ask me all the time how we get our people to care so much to be so nice, and I jokingly tell them we hire nice people and we feed them well. And it's true. You can't teach nice or that sincere desire to please. We can tell you about our intense pre-meal meetings that too many restaurants skip or do in half-hearted ways. We can share our wow sheet. We can explain how Will's team knows the guests before they walk in. We believe hospitality is the new frontier. An article came out naming the 40 most important restaurants of the last 40 years. A lot of the restaurants on that list have strong hospitality ethos. A lot of the owners and chefs of those restaurants are speaking here today. We don't know how all these lists get compiled until last night when we found out how that list got compiled. And lovely Maria is here. And we don't know how we ended up on that list. And we'll take all the awards they're giving out. But we truly believe we're only as good as the last meal we served. And that mindset, that healthy paranoia, is a helpful part of our values and culture. We believe it's an honor to serve, and we see the difference we can make in people's lives. Don't you think we make a difference in people's lives when we get it all right and go beyond? I think we change the world just a little bit sometimes. So what if we led a hospitality revolution that permeated our culture like food did in the last 35 years? It's not so far-fetched, is it? We have grown into our voice. Together we have a voice. Let's use it. Let's go mentor and motivate and ring bells and whistles about hospitality. Let's go change our industry like they did 35 years ago, and maybe our country. And let's hurry. I think the country needs us. Anyway, okay, so now we're going to talk to these charming people. Let's go do that. Hello. That's interesting. We'll just put that right there. Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Stage.
Okay. Hello. I can't even believe I'm sitting here with you all. So let's start with this one. Based on a little bit about what we were talking about there, why hasn't hospitality progressed as much as food and cooking? And this is the South, fellas, so I am starting with the lady. Miss Ashley.
Wonderful. So I think we sort of have to define progress, and I think it's we have to be a little careful to compare the innovation in food, which is very exciting and attractive, but doesn't always represent progress. And then when we look at what defines hospitality, I think there are always ways to be exploring how we dig deeper and how we dive in a little further, and ultimately with the goal to, in hospitality, we want to bring people closer to us and for there to be a deeper connection. So I think, part of, to me, the foundation of hospitality is consistency, but always looking for ways to deepen each detail and to dig a little deeper. And I think I can't speak super specifically to how we compare the two, but a lot of when we share hospitality, it's based on things that have existed in us and that make us feel warm and that we identify as, symbols of comfort. And often that's based on tradition and things that are familiar. So we see a little less innovation, but I think the key is a deeper dive into why those things make us feel welcome and at a new level of warmth.
Feel welcome. Maybe you guys want to dive in?
I think our generation, except Will, but there were restaurateurs. And now, chefs have become restaurateurs. nothing wrong with that, except that in a restaurant, you used to have the front of the house and the back of the house, and they never got along. And they always fought, and it was nasty. And it's manifesting itself now. We're learning about all the sexual discrimination and things of that nature. So the mentality of a restaurant, you know, if you're going to have hospitality, do you have a front of the house mentality? Or do you have a back of the house mentality? You know, the back of the house is everything, but it's what the guest doesn't see. So now the investor forgets about us, not Danny, because, you know, but he forgets about us, and he says, why do I want to deal with a front person when I can deal with a chef? And the next thing you know, the chef is now a restaurateur. They're no longer doing what they did best, which is cook. And they're trying to create a mentality. You know, Commanders didn't happen last night. This is something that's gone on for a long time. And we've had restaurants for many, many years. But it's not just a single brush and you say, well, you know, the chefs have taken over and it's their fault. I don't see it that way, because some people can leave the back of the house, come to the front of the house and create hospitality. But it is, I think, it's the mentality, you know, and the culture. Now, we were great. We didn't allow it. You know, forget about what happens when a chef yells at a woman. It's when a chef yells at anybody. You can't allow that. So first, you treat your staff well. That's a big change. You try to get them to be harmonious. And then you teach the principles of being nice to people. But guess what? New restaurant opens around the corner, they decamp and go there. At least in New York. So it's not so easy.
The role of the restaurateur, you're a man that would be making my mother. It's hard to sing. But you guys want to dive in on that?
It's after Drew, it's kind of hard to know what I'm diving into. But,
Happens sometimes, Danny.
so,
you know.
so I guess the question is, what's the state of hospitality today?
And why hasn't it progressed as much as
Well,
food and
yeah,
cooking?
so I actually take a different view. I think it has progressed quite a bit.
Okay.
I think that, so in 1983, and you all were here talking about the what, which is the ingredients, the food, the fact that America can become, a voice for cuisine for the first time ever.
Yep.
And I think that what's been happening over many, many years, I'll never forget in 1985 when I opened Union Square Cafe, I wasn't thinking specifically about the word hospitality. I was thinking a lot about America, a lot about food. As someone who grew up in St. Louis, I had grown up with a huge amount of hospitality, not necessarily an enormous amount of great food, Provel cheese notwithstanding. But what was starting to hit me more than anything was that the media was completely transfixed appropriately on ingredients and chefs. And that's all they were talking about. And a lot of the chefs that they were writing about were the chefs, with the macho kind of charisma in some cases. And I kept having the experience, back then we didn't have the internet, so if you wanted to learn what was going on, you had to go to the restaurants. And I would go to these restaurants, study it like crazy, read about them like crazy, and you'd go there and there would be this letdown often, not always, but often, where you went, okay, that's pretty cool what's on the plate, but they treated me poorly and I didn't enjoy the experience and I don't want to go back. And I had this gnarling feeling in my stomach all this time, which was, why can't we marry that increasingly awesome food with the way I always felt when I went out growing up in St. Louis? And in New York, for some odd reason back in those days, the restaurants that treated you the worst were the busiest. The restaurants that were the most expensive were the busiest. That's what we thought was the best. And anyway, it's kind of a long way of saying, in all these years, it's not extraordinary to me when a restaurant treats you really well today. It was back then. Mm-hmm. I truly believe that we've come a long way, and instead of focusing entirely on what's on the plate, I think we're, as an industry, doing a much, much better job of focusing on why we exist, which is for hospitality. The only reason to care about those great ingredients and to care about people who can cook them properly is for the purpose of making people feel better when they leave than however they felt when they came in the restaurant. And I think the biggest challenge right now, without any question, is that it's a confusing thing, because we've never had a period in our history, and thank you guys for starting this all in 1983.
Family.
Okay, family. Well, they're here, so thank your family. Thank the people who are on that last panel. Thank you for showing us that food is a really exciting thing that we are just as capable of as anybody else. As a result of that, in all these years, and passionate farmers and wine growers and passionate people in the media who have amplified the excitement so that consumers can get involved, thanks to that, there's never been a moment in the history of this country where more people know more about food and are more engaged with food. What that means, though, especially in an economy where there's more jobs available in our industry than there are people to fill them, I think a lot of us are compromising too often and hiring any beating heart rather than a hospitality heart. And if I have one concern against all of my optimism, it's when we just fill slots with someone who doesn't come to work for the purpose of making other people happy, but rather comes to work for the purpose of making a living, punching the clock and going home. That is probably the biggest threat. And I just think we have to be pickier than we've ever been, which doesn't make it easy to grow your organization, but it's dangerous if we're not really picky.
I think we all agree. What are you thinking, Will? Yeah.
No, I mean, I agree with Danny that it's evolved considerably in the last 10 years. But I also agree with you that it hasn't evolved as much as food and cooking has. I think that's true. And I think it's because, I mean, I would give it two explanations. First, you look around the world and there's all these food conferences and these cooking conferences and these moments where chefs can get together and share ideas and inspire one another and connect to form community. And only through community, I believe, does a craft really evolve. It's not often enough that people are standing behind a podium like you just did and delivering these like super inspiring messages. I want to like run home and do pre-meal at 11 Madison Park right now. I want to give you a round of applause because I thought that was really well articulated.
You will. You all inspire me.
I mean, that's part of the reason why we started the Welcome Conference, because we wanted to create a day where the people who serve the food could feel as much a part of something significant as those cooking the food. And I think that's important because, listen, I don't think it's possible to be really great at anything unless you name for yourself that your work matters. There's unbelievable nobility in service. And you know, we get to help people celebrate some of the most important moments in their lives. We get to give people the grace to forget about the most difficult moments, if even for just a few hours. And I agree with you that we can make the world a nicer place simply by being really nice to everyone that walks through our doors. But if you don't make that cool, if you don't make that fun, if you don't talk about it, then it's impossible to create a movement. I think the word cool is something that we kind of put aside as representing like an immature adjective, but I think that things evolve when they are cool. People want to go and become chefs because they're all over television and it's cool. And you know what you said before, how she quoted you, that there's no waiter that's a household name. Okay, I think the two of you have changed that.
Yes.
But we need heroes in hospitality just as there are heroes in cooking. And we need to give people something to reach for and people to idolize and want to emulate. And if we can make hospitality just as cool as cooking, then that's when it catches up. And that's what we try to do every day in our
love it.
restaurants.
Well, let me bleed into that and ask you each to say who your hospitality heroes are, and you cannot name each other, okay? Just for right now, okay, we all know.
Can we name Miss Ellen?
Well, you can, but other two things: hospitality heroes, and also were there turning points for you from a hospitality perspective that inspired you? Things that happened, things you saw, read, experienced. So those two things. Will you dive into those things?
Sure. Of course, present company and many folks who have passed on. I think a lot about Nancy Silverton, who I think is so present and constantly evolving. And one of the most important characteristics, and to me, in a leader, a hospitality leader, is to be accessible. And I see her at events, and she's so available for conversation. And I've seen so many people approach her. And you know, I think this is one of the things that stands out as so important to me, to, you know, to be a mentor to people that you haven't had the chance to meet yet, and to really to open up. And I think that's the point of, you know, Will, to your point, of the community that's created around events, is being able to be vulnerable and exchange great ideas, but as a leader to really open yourself up to those conversations. And I think, you know, I'm sure we've all, or many of you have sat in her dining room and watched her work that room and share what they do from the kitchen. I also think she sets a great example of sort of turning back to the first question of what it means to be a leader who first expresses themselves through the kitchen, and then you know, to the front of the house. And I think as you know, chef owners of concepts, and you know, that there's this real opportunity. I love the whole package because I watched my parents cook, but then feed people, and, you know, to share and listen to music and to entertain. And so it all is of equal value to me. But I think one of the really positive pieces of what's happening right now in the industry, you see a number of people who are, you know, starting in the kitchen and then working their way out. And I think from there we get a real bond between service and the kitchen production. And you know, I think that really gives us the opportunity to inspire each other within our walls on a daily basis. And you know, absolutely that starts with the pre-shift and you know, walking the walk. But also, you know, I learned this from a conversation with you guys, I think in Aspen a few years ago, about sort of the deep dive into pre-shift. And from there, we completely revamped our pre-shift across the country. And, you know, we do it with front and back of the house now together, and they're constantly teaching each other something about each other's role. And for that, we have so much more value. And the product of that is elevated hospitality across the board.
It's true. We're so lucky to be able to do that twice a day.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think we have to fit into the community, especially if the restaurant's going to be around for a while. And there's just a tremendous number of charity now that we do. I mean, it's unbelievable. But at the beginning, when we would travel to Wyoming or Florida or Hawaii to do these events, it was the first time that we were meeting the chefs, and maybe even seeing their food. And it began a moment of camaraderie, which was very, very important. And I can see how that's evolved. But the big thing, you know, we do all this, and you know, maybe there's an ulterior motive besides just the charity aspect of, well, someone's going to see what you're doing, and they're going to come to your restaurant. And you know that nobody's ever come up to me and said, you know, I saw that you supported, you know, Autism Speaks, and that's why we're here. So you know, it's constant. We have to do this, you know, really constantly. And you know, what we can't lose sight of the fact is also the staff that we have, in many cases, believe this, has never been a guest. They don't have the financial means to go to the restaurants. I don't know about other parts of the country, but New York has become very expensive. very expensive. $100 per person is, that's a reasonable experience. And how can you serve somebody if you've never been a guest? How do you, and so we make every employee in all the restaurants go to one of the restaurants. Nobu is just a phenomenon. It's like, it's busy. You can't get in. Oh, we did 450 dinners last night. I mean, it's unbelievable. So, but those services, they become robotic sometimes. And, we have to place them in the dining room, seated as a guest, for them to see, for them to look out and just realize it should be natural. It has to be spontaneous. That has to be the normal experience. But I think it's very important that they experience how to be a guest.
I love that you pointed that out. It's so true. But some moments or anything?
Well, you asked for a couple of heroes,
I would love that.
right? So, did you want to?
You're my hero.
I said you couldn't say that.
You can't do that.
No, we couldn't say that? Oh.
Yeah, I have two hospitality heroes.
Okay, can I just say who my hero is?
He's your hero. Be
I
nice
think
to him.
Emerald Lagasse is my hero.
Yeah.
No, this is a true story. I don't know, it was here in New Orleans, and I went to see him, or I don't know what the circumstance was, but they were doing a pre-shift. So I walk in, and now they got to film Emerald Lagasse doing a pre-shift.
Man can do appreciate.
They do jumping jacks. I was like, this is unbelievable. They were getting fired up, so you are my hero, Emerald. I'm telling you, you do a fantastic
Knows how
job.
to do that. Go ahead, Danny.
Oh, thank you, Drew. That's all right. Okay.
You can continue.
So two categories for me: one professional and one amateur, which means to love. And in the professional category, no question at all, Ella Brennan and Jean-Claude Vrinat. Two amazing restaurateurs, one French, one Creole. Irish, just like I said. But both did something that I just had never seen before. It used to be, when I would go to a fancy restaurant, that you had to be polite to the maitre d' if you wanted to get a good table. The waiter sort of looked down his nose at you to decide whether you were good enough to receive the great service from the tuxedo. Both of these two people were the first who I had ever seen. Taillamont in Paris, Commander's Palace here in New Orleans, where the quality of the service, which is all the technical stuff, was exquisite. And yet, there was this twinkle in the eye constantly, this sense that we are having fun taking service seriously, that we are not doing this to show you that we are mightier than thou, but to show you that we know why you came here, which is to feel better while you're getting this amazing technical, culinary, and service choreography. And the twinkle in the eye was the part that I had just never seen before, to go with all of that excellence. That sounds like an obvious thing, but it did not exist in my experience till those two people. Great quote from Jean-Claude Vrinat. I think I was fortunate to eat there twice in the early 1990s or it was the late 80s, and it was a hugely formative experience for me, which I would say led to Gramercy Tavern. In fact, Jean-Claude Vrinat was the one who told me when he went to Gramercy Tavern, you just had a love child between Union Square Cafe and Taillamont. So that's pretty cool. But when I asked him, how come it's always so perfect here? He said, oh, it's far from perfect. Our smiles mask our imperfections. I love that. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
The other person, though, which is the person that taught me the power of hospitality, is a woman to whom I dedicated setting the table, named Mary Smith. Mary Smith was the daughter of a Mississippi sharecropper who was our housekeeper in St. Louis when I grew up. And she is the reason that I'm sitting in the seat right now. She taught me that food is love. She taught me that providing food and the pleasure that it gives you to provide that for other people is the hug you get back.
I wish I knew her. It's beautiful. I love it.
I think you did know her.
She, one of the phrases we use, I don't know, and maybe you, I don't know where you're going to go with this, Will, but when people come into some of your restaurants and it's been built up so much in their mind, I mean, like, how do you live up to that? So we try to bring it down, and we like to call Commanders a fine dining joint. You know, just everybody relax. We're here to have a good time. How do you do it? Because the expectations are high, Will.
Well, first.
And you do it.
So to the Thai event point, Danny sent Daniel, whom my business partner and chef, to Thai event when we first started at 11 Madison Park, and I went to that restaurant very intimidated. It was the first 3 Michelin star restaurant in Paris I'd ever been to, and I was wearing, you know, when you go to restaurants like that and you're young, you like think about your outfit and you want to look just right. And I had worn a pair of pants that, for whatever reason, were very slippery, to the point that my napkin kept on falling off your lap, or my lap. And you know, the first time that happens in a fine dining restaurant, you're a little embarrassed because you don't even notice it's happened until they bring you the new napkin. And I think it happened like 5 times, to the point where I was mortified. Like, I was not doing my restaurant experience there justice. And the 5th time they brought me a napkin, perfect silver tray, perfectly folded napkin, and a clothespin on top. And I just started laughing, and suddenly I wasn't embarrassed anymore, and I was able to actually relax and enjoy the meal. And so yeah, that's a very inspiring place. To the point of my heroes, though, I have to break the rules here because no, this is for me kind of one of those punctuated moments in my career, because I'm sitting on stage right now with, outside of my father, the only 2 people I've ever worked for, which is Drew and Danny, and they are my hospitality heroes, and to be on the stage right now with the 2 of them is nothing short of extraordinary and makes me so unbelievably proud.
Yeah.
No, I mean it.
Well,
I think Drew, no, I'm talking about you right now. Drew, if anyone has ever been in a restaurant where he's working the floor, it's intuitive hospitality. I remember the first time seeing him walk into Tribeca Grill when I was waiting tables, and I saw the energy and the way that people lit up and the way that he so intuitively just made everyone feel good, even the tables he didn't touch. And when you grow up and you're studying, my dad always had me journal, because as you get promoted, you invariably lose the perspective that you had when you were in the position before. And he said, make sure you're always journaling so that you can be as empathetic to all the people that work for you as you possibly can. And I remember writing about Drew one day when I got home from service. I want to make people feel that good when I walk into a room as effortlessly as he does. It was intuitive hospitality. And you still got it.
that's very nice. You know, I would say the fish stinks from the head. You know,
That's your response to everything I just said?
no, first of all,
I just thought we were doing something kind of emotional there, and I'm not even...
oh,
All right, yeah, fuck it.
Okay. You know, well, you're the biggest fish that got away. Let's just put it that way. No, what I meant by that is, like think of just the tremendous amount of respect to the Brennan family. You know, I want to see the family tree one day. It's got to be online.
We're all related. Don't worry about
it. I want to see who belongs to who, because I'm still confused. But when I say the fish stinks from the head, it's like you have to set the example. So, you know, what I realized, you know, I worked on a cruise ship as a waiter with 60 other waiters. I was one of 2 Americans. The first day, I wore a blue shirt. I had 59 waiters laughing at me because I had never worked as a waiter. I got on, in 1974, I got on a cruise ship, never having worked as a waiter, and it was 600-seat dining room. You serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner. You learn the job very quickly because the others teach you. And, but you just, you know, when you own your own restaurants, you have to set the example. You have to do everything so they see you're not afraid to get your hands dirty, and therefore Yeah, that's the first level, at least, of hospitality, where, again, you have to have them on your side. There used to be so much, the 21 Club. You talked about Jerry Burns. You used to go to the 21 Club, and as they were leading you to the table, they say, put them someplace else. Because, is it, a certain part of the night? Part of what made our generation, we saw how deficient, you talked about it. We saw, like, all we have to do is be nice to people. We have to treat people with dignity and respect, friendliness, thank them. To this day, if somebody says, I went to your restaurant, blah, 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 but, I always say, thank you for coming. And if the video that you showed, there's Ella Brennan, thank you for coming. And that's what it's about.
Or cleaning the ladies' room, Anyway.
Yeah, cleaning the
It's
I
part of the deal.
I need to do one more thing here because
Yes.
I want to talk about what I learned from Danny. So much, but
In that case, the fish stinks from the bottom.
no. If what I learned from Drew was just intuitively embodying hospitality, I learned from Danny, and this is his phrase: putting intention to that intuition. In Danny's approach to hospitality, I learned that the same creativity that goes into creating a dish can be put into how you care for someone. Our favorite thing to do in our restaurants is when we go off script. It's when we improvise. It's when we see someone clearly and figure out what we can do to make that moment one of the most important moments in their lives. And watching you do that, and then watching the way that you inspired all of us in that company to take ownership and feel pride and confidence in our conviction, it's been probably the greatest gift you ever gave me. And so I say it again, to be on the stage with the two of them is kind of a dream come true. And I'm
Wow.
really happy that you made that happen.
They're all sitting on this stage because they're all my heroes, and thank God they accepted my phone call and they're here. But
I want to meet the person who wouldn't have.
oh, you're so sweet.
Yeah, no.
But Will said something about Drew affecting the tables he didn't go to. And somehow when somebody can have that ability to affect an entire room and not even sometimes be aware of how they're doing it. And if you ever have the pleasure to watch my cousin Lally Brennan do this, she has no idea how she's affecting the entire room as she is in the room doing her job. So, yes, so my cousin Lally.
Watched her do it last night.
Yeah, you watched her do it last night. It's
By the way,
amazing.
I'm going to interrupt real quickly. You got to be somewhat careful, though, and I've had the experience embarrassingly on 2 different occasions that are just etched in my mind where in one case I got a scathing email the following morning from someone who said, I saw you say hello to every single table except
Here we
for
go.
mine.
Here we go.
And I need to know what I did to earn that scorn from you.
I know.
And I just, this was right after Maialino had opened, and I felt like I knew every table in the restaurant. I was completely overwhelmed, and I didn't see that table, and it just felt horrible. And then another occasion where a food journalist said, you may have noticed you haven't seen me for the last 3 years. And I went, I guess you're right. And he says, I will never forget how you walked right by me at Tabla, having said hello to every other table there. And what did I do to earn that?
Oh, wow.
And I hadn't seen the person. And so what's interesting is that your intentions, and can you imagine 3 years of bearing that feeling? And I didn't even know it the whole time. It's tough.
It is hard, and we've all been there.
Maybe Lally can teach me. a
Get
few
Lally. Just watch Lally. No. But I'll tell you something.
Can I just point
Yeah,
out
come on.
that
This is the theme of our.
we haven't even mentioned social media, but you talk about hospitality, and hospitality was when you would call a restaurant and the person answering, was pleasant, and you can't even call a restaurant anymore. At least in New York. Again, I'm gonna, like you try to call, and you get put into, go online. And then if you don't subscribe to that service, you have a problem just literally communicating. Now, we're in the business, so we always wind up going through back channels and making reservations through friends. But, it's changed
agree.
And it's totally anti-hospitality.
I agree with you very much. But we are going to talk about it. But in 2 seconds, somebody tell me how our timing's doing over there. Somebody give a smoke signal. Can you tell what she's saying?
She's going like this. Keep going.
Keep going. All right. Until you tell me
She's
different.
loving it.
Thank you. She's like, I don't know. Keep talking. Okay. We are going to do social media a little bit. Do you think user-generated media has affected hospitality? You just said that's technology affecting hospitality. You just talked about it. But I think you know where I'm going. Come on, Ashley. What are you thinking?
Sure. I think the initial period was something to adjust to. In the conversation about, welcoming guests in, I think, we use that word because we like to celebrate hospitality as a relationship, not a transaction. And to me, a lot of that sort of spouting via social media or internet reviews can be really one-sided, and that's the trouble of not having the presence of the relationship and the conversation. Is there's a lot that goes into those moments, and usually what someone has to say that may be extremely negative online, there's a lot of information that's missing there. So it's really disheartening at first, I think, to feel like you don't have, in hospitality, anything's possible. We really can fix nearly anything. So I think it was a reminder to tune our crews up, to really dial in to all the cues, which I really, I feel like that's one of the details that people really notice when you point out or bring up, thoughtfully, did you enjoy your meal this evening? I noticed, you didn't finish it, or, however we dig down for that information. But I also think there was an opportunity after that first push of that happening, that we then got to decide, well, how much of this matters? Because again, another piece of hospitality, the piece that is missing when we're not having conversations with people, is we can't dig down and get the information. And sometimes where I sort of, learned one of the lessons was when we would reach out for information and you'd get no response. And if, it's people aren't willing to be a part of the relationship with you, it's really hard to value that feedback. So, but yeah, I think it's, you see the stars and you see for Yelp or all the different dining apps that are based on experiences that people have or have not had actually in your restaurant. I remember seeing one that said, for Pool's Diner, that said 1 star, take reservations already. Like that means they didn't even come in. Right. The wait was too long, and we get 1 star because of that. So, I think any opportunity to get information and try and participate in a conversation that gets us to a better experience, I'm all for. I think it all has an effect. People, I've heard people talk about choosing restaurants by looking at those apps and the reviews. I think we're at a place now where folks are having to give a little more detail to be credible in those reviews, and I think that's good. But it is a reminder, in the walls of our restaurants to dig deeper for any information we can get on all the touches that happen between the time the guest walks in the door and they walk out the door. They're reminding everybody of all those opportunities, because I can't remember what the exact percentage is, but it's very low, the number of people who will actually convey to you how they feel verbally when they're in your restaurant, versus what happens when they go out into the community. And I think it's a great thing to I think the reminder is great, and it's a really exciting time to, as we've been discussing, just to dig deeper into all the pieces of hospitality that allow us to have a relationship with our guests in the dining room.
To feel when they're not having a good time.
Yeah. And also just to celebrate when they are, or, one of my favorite conversations is how much opportunity is built into an experience not being perfect. And I think so often people walk out and become the people who celebrate you most because of what you did to turn around an experience that could have gone off the rails.
I think the guest has a say in the matter. Many, many times, when you took reservations, it's a birthday, it's a celebration. They let us know. So they weren't saying do something, but they let us know it was a special occasion. It was up to us, whether it's our generosity or just our manner, to do something.
Right.
And look, social media is unbelievable. It's the most important tool. You cannot get into your car and, you're not going to GPS where you're going, especially in New York where the traffic's miserable. So now, any restaurant has a website. And guess what you can do? You can go up on the website and you can see the menu. What does the menu do? It tells you the price point. People used to go to restaurants, they didn't even know what they were getting into. They didn't even know enough about the restaurant. So now the most knowledgeable person should be the people who step into our restaurants. I mean, I think it's really important. I learn more when I look at a menu. I learn more about the mentality of a restaurant when I look at the prices. And again, it's like pre-planning. And by the way, the guest has a say in the matter, because if you want to have a good time at a restaurant, you'll do everything in your power, everything, to have a good time. But like if you come to a restaurant, I'm sorry, your table's not ready yet, and they force you up to, and if it becomes one of those experiences where you just get the feeling that you're a number.
Or you told the restaurant it's a special occasion,
Right.
and they didn't do anything because
Yeah.
they didn't write it
Something
down.
like that.
I think to Drew's point, I think the positive effects of social media far outweigh the negative.
Yeah.
Two ways that I would look at it. First is related to your first question about hospitality. If you think about the power of social media in our industry, an enormous amount of that is Instagram with the photographs. And everybody's taking a photograph of their plate of food, but no one's taking a photograph of how we made you feel. And therein lies the most amazing opportunity for all of us. As a matter of fact, in addition to what Drew was just saying correctly, that people, not only do they look at the menu in advance, they look at all the photographs of the food. They look at all the reviews of the food. They read everything before they come in, which is great. But nobody's taking pictures of the gesture that you made to make me feel better. And if we can say that is the frontier that our entire industry has to take this thing over the top, that's an extraordinary opportunity.
So
and
hard
then
to do.
secondly, I could not agree more with what Ashley just said, that it's a wonderful opportunity, social media. It was scary at the beginning. I was petrified by people writing blogs. That's what we had before we had Twitter and Yelp and all this kind of stuff. And now what I love is that we have the opportunity to eavesdrop in real time on conversations that are happening at what used to be a table of two and is now a table of 2 times however many social followers you have. And we can take, potentially bad experiences and correct them in real time. We can take already good experiences and bring them over the top in real time. And we do. We listen. We listen very carefully in a way that, when I was working the dining room at Union Square Cafe in 1985, I was at your table and my sensors may have been throughout the entire restaurant, but now my ears can be everywhere.
I think it's true that it's hard to take a picture of how we make people feel in a restaurant, but I do notice, and I think it's very exciting, that people have a lot to say in those captions for Instagram about, it's no longer just about this dish is this, this, and this. I notice more often than not, there are comments about something wonderful about what people are experiencing together, or how that food makes them feel, and I think that's an exciting turn in social media.
But it is so hard to take those pictures. It's not as visual as food. I have to share, though, that last week a guest sent us a picture of our extraordinary valet in the biggest downpour, standing with an umbrella at the car, and it's just pouring on him, and he's doing it like that. Those are the pictures you're hoping for, and they're hard to come by. Do we have time for questions? Because I know we talked about that. It's just Walter Isaacson. So anyway, Walter, can we do some pictures? Yes, we do. Can we? Okay, maybe you have
they're
one.
good questions.
Did we want to do some questions? We have a mic out here where we're going to right down up front, if you would. Is that okay with you all?
Yeah.
Okay. Please.
How do you, with your teams, break down the barrier and create humanity between back of the house cooks reading a ticket, a table number, servers saying they're putting on their Waitron face, people feeling like they have to be robotic with service, and how to make things even more personal, especially in the back of the house, because there is a barrier?
I think, one of the most valuable things that we do from back of the house is, and I think it gets people more excited about hospitality and about the food they're cooking, is to have cooks run food and, to take it to a guest and explain what it is and all the pride that comes along with that. I think to the point of pre-shift, involving back of the house and front of the house together, and or service and kitchen, and we like to explore food topics with the front of the house, and to have cooks, all the cooks pair up and teach something to a member of the service team. And the same goes, the kitchen participates in all the wine tastings and cocktail development tastings. And so I think just really getting everybody on the same, first of all, giving them all the same information, because everyone deserves that information, and giving them all the same opportunities to learn, I think really is a big, a big contributor to creating one house working with the same hospitality goals.
True. Other answers, gentlemen?
No, I mean, our company is we're literally 50-50, Daniel, whom, and I, between the kitchen and the dining room. And that's because our belief is that the best restaurants we could ever imagine ourselves running are those that are run by both sides of the wall. It invariably results in tension, because while we agree with what we're trying to accomplish, we don't necessarily always agree on the ways to accomplish it. But what we talk about all the time in our restaurants is the importance of embracing that tension. I think that too often when tension arises between the people cooking the food and those serving it, people turn away from each other. And we see those moments as ones where we can turn towards each other to celebrate the fact that that tension is born out of passion. And if we can all just seek resolution and understand that if we just talk about every single day the fact that it's not two different teams of people that happen to be working inside of one building, but that we are all on the same team and we're all aligned in the spirit of our collective endeavor, that's when we can actually do remarkable things.
Danny, I think you had...
One real quick thing. You notice that, first of all, words matter a lot. And you notice that Will just talked about the kitchen and the dining room. In the same way that I think as an industry we've been somewhat successful at changing the focus on customer, which implies a monetary transaction, to guest, which implies I am hosting you. I think that when you talk about back of the house and front of the house, those are powerful words that do not help us get where we want to go. Imagine if the Saints yesterday at halftime talked about the front of the team and the back of the team. No, it is one team trying to accomplish one goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, back of house and front of house are you're not allowed to use those words
Heart
in
of
our
house.
company.
Heart of house.
But a waiter comes into the kitchen and says, my guest ordered rack of lamb sauce on the side. The chef starts going nuts. You're not cooking for the waiters. The waiter made the request. You're cooking for the guest. The guest is simply it's just transferring the message. But the mentality of the back of the house, and it is offense and defense, by the way, and once in a while they do point fingers, Not one team, trust me. One guy retired in the middle of the game yesterday.
I read that. That was bizarre. To
So,
get back on track,
Danny-
though.
No. What I simply want to, it's like it's not all one thing.
No.
It's going to be every day, in the individual parts of everything that we do. It's if you're committed.
It's not one team, but it's one purpose.
Yeah, one purpose, and you make the commitment. You make the commitment to stay on track.
There's a story, well, Danny, I think when you're chef, Daniel, and I think you were still doing the hamburgers in the restaurant for Shake Shack, and he was like, would you get them hamburgers out of my get you had to move it? You were telling that story one day. Am I making that up?
I think that was between Daniel and you guys know Shake Shack was born out of 11 Madison Park. All the burgers were prepped in the kitchen, in the private dining room kitchen, and that continued through the first 6 months of us evolving into the fine dining restaurant. So, in the middle of like a 7-course, crazy fine dining lunch, we'd be rocking like with sheet pans full of burger patties through the dining room. Yeah,
Shake Shack was a hell of a lot busier than 11 Madison Park back
yeah,
then.
it's true. No, it really is true. We at least one of those Michelin stars was bought through Shake Shack profits. But yeah, Daniel lost it one day, and then the next day we weren't doing Shake Shack patties out of 11 Madison Park anymore.
Can't you imagine him? Would you get them hamburgers out of my... Anyway, I think we have time for like one more question. If there's the mic over here. Oh, is that one John Pope?
It certainly
It's
is.
his.
I'm speaking as a customer who has experienced both ends of the hospitality spectrum. At Commander's in Taillevent, the service made me go out smiling. At a restaurant I won't name, the server quit in the middle of the meal without telling us. And I had not been too snarky. But anyway, here's the question I think is underlying what you all are saying. How do you get better servers? Do you hire nice people, or do you beat into their heads the importance of being hospitable?
I think
So
you make
beating,
the job,
yeah.
I think you make the job as easy as possible. I think it's a disservice to your servers to have, let's just say, a meeting on cocktails and try to teach them 10 cocktails at that session because it's too much information. They're not going to grasp it. And, then it's not natural and they're reading from a piece of paper. So, in other words, of course, somebody is more adept to wanting to be, to provide service. My mother was an actress who became a casting director in later life. At the dinner table, she used to say, we had to go to the West Coast to cast this commercial. I couldn't imagine that they couldn't find an actor on the East Coast to be in a commercial. But if casting is very important to what we do, and Danny touched on it earlier, you have to do your best when you interview the staff members to find somebody that is at least going to be able to take direction. When you say, please do something, and they don't roll their eyes, or there isn't some crazy, it's body language, but it's intuitive. You'll know it when you're interviewing them.
I would argue that part of it is keeping the work challenging in positive ways. And I think that keeps people more engaged and being able to provide the mentorship and well-detailed training. But I think a really important thing with pre-shift is to be discussing something every day that's looking at a consistent issue in a new light, in a new way. And just keeping people excited to come to work, ready to rise to a new challenge every day. And I think that engagement keeps us more attentive to detail and looking for...
You do everything you can think of, right? You talk about, God knows what at pre-meal, you do the strategic planning meetings with the whole team you talked about.
I mean, I don't know if I would articulate the encouragement process as beating them over the head with hospitality. A lot of people say you can't train hospitality, and perhaps that's true. But I believe you can encourage it. And we were talking about this over dinner last night, that it's impossible to know how to bestow graciousness if you haven't experienced often enough what it is to receive it. And if we just make the people, if obviously you need to train them and give them the skill sets needed to actually execute their job in as close to perfect a way as possible. But then it's about making people feel really good so that they know how good it is to make other people feel good. We were saying that if somehow there was a law passed where for the next 2 months, everyone needed to be really, really nice to everyone that worked at the DMV. I bet everyone at the DMV would be really nice, but of course they're mean because everyone's so annoyed to be there that they're mean to them, and then it's just, I think that you hire good people and you treat them really, really well, and they get addicted to how that feels, and they want to make other people feel the same way.
We have time for one more?
Hey.
Yeah,
One of your buddy.
Hi, up here, if you'll indulge me.
absolutely.
Hi, it's Helen LeBourgeois.
Hey, Helen,
Hi.
how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I have a question. I found this topic very fascinating. My company is a service provider to the restaurant community here in the New Orleans area. And while I don't have the tenure of a lot of you, I've been doing this for 22 years now, and I always marvel at how some of my restaurant customers are gracious and lovely and warm and work very hard when we hit the invariable speed bump to have mutual success for both parties, for my company and for the restaurant. Yet there are other restaurateurs who are very dismissive, abusive, disrespectful, arrogant. And so I'd love to hear your views on the dynamics of the differences between a vendor versus a partner, and maybe what needs to happen to have some of those behaviors you're talking about in terms of hospitality to your guests in your restaurant translate into the supply partner world.
I'm going to say one thing for y'all. Tell me who those people are, Helen, and we're going to take a little walk around the cemetery. Anyway, would any of you all? Because she's lovely. Everyone should
I
treat
think
her beautifully.
that's probably a pretty good, tell of how they treat their staff as well. And sometimes folks, when we manage what's ahead of us to do, I think we approach our vendor relationships the same way we approach our relationships with our team and our guests, and that's to have a clear set of expectations for what we want to make happen, and to give them all the information they need, and to understand that things happen and we're human and we move through that and keep things positive. And I think one of which I know you guys have experienced many times here, but we just had a hurricane in North Carolina. We have beautiful relationships with our vendors, and I've got an inbox full of folks who have sent emails to say, what can we do to help? Where can we donate wine? Where can we donate product? And I think all of that is creates a more positive industry for us as a whole. And to that point, we also, the same standards that we put in place for our team, we hold as far as how they respect each other and treat each other and work together, we hold our guests to those same standards, and we hold our vendors to those same standards as well.
You all have lived that.
Yeah, I want to just say you cannot have you can't have cafeteria hospitality where you pick and choose who you're going to be nice to, and it's either genuine or it's not. Hospitality is not hospitality if it's for some and not all. That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. But we have actually named the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality, and we tell our staff members, your first and highest priority is how you treat each other. Because if you're not jazzed to come into work tomorrow, to be with each other, how in the world can we expect our guests to have a great experience? So it starts with how our team members treat each other, then how they treat our guests, then how they take care of their community, then how they take care of our suppliers, and finally how they take care of our investors. And it's not that we're putting our investors at the bottom of a totem pole, but
It takes care of itself.
it's what follows what.
Right.
And we can't win if we don't have great suppliers.
Yeah.
We know that.
So Helen, you're going to buy a few copies of Danny's books for those people, okay? Because he talks about. Okay.
And just in terms of hospitality, it's so basic, but here it is. Say yes, don't say no. The guest comes in. I'd like to sit on the roof today for lunch. Give me 1 second. Let me see if I can arrange that.
Right.
And then, this is we tell everybody. We say, go to the manager, and then the manager comes over and says, listen, I'd love to be able to seat you on the roof. Unfortunately, we have no tables on the roof. So if we can seat you in the dining room, and I promise we'll take, this is what it's all about. Say yes before you say no. That's what it's about.
Let the managers say no.
Good advice.
That's right. That's their job.
Good.
That's
I
their
think
job.
we might have to end it on that, and I could do this all day.
Thank
And I am thrilled and honored to have had you all here.
It was
Still
a
can't
pleasure
believe
for
it.
us.
Thank you, thank you,
Thank you so
thank you.
much.
Help me finish on.